Hello, internet dweller. It is time for a vibe check. Hello, my name is Jenna, and today you're watching another WWM Productions video, and this time I have an idea. I don't know if it's a good one, but we're gonna try it. So in this jar, I got a bunch of papers, if you couldn't tell. On these slips of papers, I have written an aesthetic or a subgenre, and I am going to pick two random slips of paper out of this jar, put them together, create some ungodly combination, and try and recommend either a film, and if I have to rely on it, a book, and I am going to see just what happens. To the video. First two. Okay, I have royal, I have historical. Okay, well this is easy, so, The Crown. This is our first one. Huzzah! I recommend The Crown. It is a TV show. I am still in the middle of watching it, but I've made it a whole season in. I'm in the second season right now, and each season is fairly self-contained because it follows Queen Elizabeth, or at least so far, as her father dies and she has to become queen at a very young age. She has just married her husband, Prince Philip. She has to just become queen and take up the crown. And this is like a fairly basic show, I guess. It always gets nominated for things when it has a new season out. And it definitely has the reputation of being a bit like, I don't want to say boring, but it's definitely like slow and deliberate. But there are a couple reasons that I really enjoy this show. First of all, I just really enjoy history. While this show maybe doesn't totally do things factually, because it definitely has to go for like that drama element, I think it is definitely still a interesting show because it draws not only from like the royal family's history, but also from like different political aspects. So, for example, in the first season, you see a lot of Winston Churchill and the things that occur after World War II in his term as Prime Minister, and I just thought that dynamic between the government and the crown was really interesting, and just all of the sets and the costumes and everything is really great as a period piece, so that's especially interesting to me. I enjoy all of that stuff. And also just the story itself and how it focuses on Queen Elizabeth and how much her life is changing and how she's trying to adapt to all of it and be the best queen she can be, while also, I don't want to say like struggling with her own humanity, but how as the world just keeps changing and it continues to in the show, so she has to kind of adapt and figure out what does the crown mean in this ever-changing world, and how much does she keep with tradition, how much does she kind of change. And I just think it's very interesting, so I think kind of easy for that. It's 4 seasons, so if you're definitely looking for a good like hunker down show, you just need something, maybe you need like a palate cleanser, you've been like watching a lot of one thing, so you want to spice it up with a historical period drama, The Crown lies at your feet. Number 2. A whodunit and Gothic. Okay, I was actually really hoping these two would go together, but the movie I'm going to talk about also takes place roughly in one mansion, so I think that satisfies the Gothic part of this. I mean, I know that's not like really what Gothic is, but Gothic is generally has like a darker tone and atmosphere, and typically, like a lot of times, like, or at least what we see now with Gothic, like literature or film, it generally takes place in like one like crumbling mansion or like a castle. A gross oversimplification of Gothic, but you know, crash course in it here. The movie I'm choosing for this is none other than Knives Out. I've talked about it before, and I mean, a lot of people were talking about it when it came out, and I'm also using, I guess, for this category, the whodunit category subgenre a little loosely, just because Knives Out kind of gets all over the place with whether it's a whodunit, a howdunit, a whydunit. It's all the dunnits. And you have all the questions that you have to try and figure out during the course of this movie. And it takes place in a mansion, for the most part. Sometimes they leave the mansion, but the mansion is very much a part of the movie. Ergo Gothic whodunit. But Knives Out, if you don't know it, follows a very, very rich family as kind of like the patriarch dies under suspicious circumstances, and the entire family, who you would think would be more connected and seems to appear at first to kind of like be close to each other. It follows them and the nursemaid of the patriarch who died, and they're all gathered at the house because they have to do the reading of the will, but also the grandfather's father's death is being investigated, so they all have to be interviewed by like the detectives and the police. And while they're there, you follow the nursemaid in particular, who is played by Ana de Armas, and she kind of gets roped into this investigation by, he's played by Daniel Craig, and he's kind of this like very like witty detective, and just Knives Out is just not a movie you expect it to be. It is always changing, like right on a dime, and it just keeps you like involved the whole way through, and you have no idea what's happening, and it's just so fun to try and put everything together, and it just has like such great atmosphere. And I went into this movie thinking it was going to be one thing, and just by the time I left the movie, I had gone through a whole character arc along with all of the different characters. It was so satisfying to watch, and it balances like kind of a darker tone, but as well like a fun murder mystery without losing focus of the narrative or what it's trying to do and its different messages. And I think it's a pretty great movie to go and watch it. If you haven't seen it already, then what are you doing? Get on that. I think that's all I have to really say about Knives Out. It's a really great mystery. It has those gothic vibes. Again, like the house, like I don't know how much of the house like really exists and how much of it was made as a set, but just the knife chair, I mean, come on. Is your house complete without a throne made of knives that is then used in the climax? Like, I don't think it is. Number 3. Oh my god, no, this is awful. I got Coffee House and I got Heist, which like, what do I even do with those? See, Coffee House is funny because it doesn't really exist, or like it's not like a full story. Like if anything, it's used as like a story element or kind of like a catalyst into a story. Like two characters like meet at a coffee house and then they like go around. Like this would be fun. Like if we have any like writers or artists or like just any creatives watching this video, please make a coffee house heist story. I'm going to bend the rules a little bit because I'm taking like the atmosphere of a coffee house and I'm taking the idea of a heist, and instead of doing the more formal idea of like group of characters have to assemble, steal a thing, get out, things go wrong at every turn, I'm not so much doing that, and I'm just taking the absolute basic idea of a heist as in at least one character steals a thing. But the thing I'm going to talk about more in detail is The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue by V.E. Schwab, and I'm taking the idea of a character stealing something and applying it to this book because it follows Addie LaRue, who was born in 18th century France. She, as a woman, once she gets to a certain age, people start to approach her differently because really at that time they believed that a woman's role is to be married, have children, keep the house, and Addie LaRue just doesn't want that. She wants to have a future. She wants to explore the world. She wants to see more than her small French town. And on the night of her wedding, she escapes and she makes a deal with this dark god after night, and she says, I want to see the world, and the way that the god interprets her wish is that he makes her immortal, but no one remembers her. So once someone like turns their back on her or leaves the room, they come back in and they see her, they don't remember her. She just ceases to exist in their memory. She is essentially trying to steal as much time as she can from her regular life. It also follows her in like 2014 New York City as she actually meets someone who inexplicably remembers her and how that changes her life. In the way that the coffee house kind of aspect of this loops into it is just that New York City bohemian setting and how that plays into the like where the characters go and like where Addie LaRue goes and the different places she meets all of the different people that either remember her or don't. And just, I don't know, it definitely has that like closed, like warm but also like impersonal feeling of a coffee house where anyone can walk through the door and anyone could be in there when you're there, and how just by like simply like living a life that she was never supposed to have, she is stealing that time away from the person that she used to be. This book is very good. I haven't finished it yet. It's written very beautifully, and I'm so excited to actually finish it because I've heard only good things about it. And while it definitely has its own like different like ideas that depending on how you see things, maybe it won't appeal to you, and there are some things that I definitely don't think are like amazing about this book or are a little like narrow in its thinking of like how it approaches Addie LaRue's problem. It's just a story that like is very thick and rich, and you can just fall right into it and just let it envelop you for a good long while. So, good book. Okay, that's one. What did I get? What did I get? Another weird one. Cottagecore. I got steampunk. Cottagecore is like, it you know, it's a cottage, like, living in the woods, like, baking. It's kind of, like, quaint and pleasant, and it's very calm and peaceful. That's how I'm going to describe it. And then steampunk is essentially, like, steam, like, you know, like, steam-powered things, so it's definitely, like, a little more, like, vintage, maybe, if you think of it, but it also has that, like, kind of, like, punk rock attitude to it. It definitely has a bit of a bite. That was the weirdest way to describe steampunk, but, like, just take any of these things, go to Google Images and type it in, and you'll know what it is. Like, cottagecore isn't, like, really an aesthetic that super applies to, like, dynamic media, I feel like, because I think it would just kind of be hard to make something that, like, lasts as cottagecore. I feel like it's a very ephemeral thing to aspire to, so I feel like it's only something that you really get, like, the end of a story or something that is broken in the beginning of a story. I think what I'm going to go with is another book. It's Timekeeper by Tara Sim. I read this book a while ago, and I thought it would make a really great HBO adaptation, so, like, HBO, please adapt Timekeeper. I think you could do some really great things. I don't know that much about, like, HBO's style, but I just think HBO would do it well. So, like, just, you know, if y'all are out there, y'all are listening, look into it. But it follows a essentially like clockwork apprentice who lives in alternate history London, where clocks kind of like are huge like mystical things that, I mean, like, they control time, but not in the way that like we expect it to. Like, if something goes wrong to like one of these like huge clock towers, like time just falls apart. The main character of the book, something went wrong on one of the clocks he was working on, and he kind of has some trauma from that experience, and it's getting harder and harder for him to keep working as, like, a clocksmith, and he's in risk of losing his job, even though he's, like, one of the best. So he gets assigned to this one clock that's having, like, some minor issues, and inadvertently, it's actually because there's a clock spirit there who is causing trouble in some capacity, and the two kind of get closer, and it's their relationship between the clock spirit and the clockmaker, and it has definitely, like, a quaint feeling, and it's definitely, like, antique, but it also has that steampunk vibe to it that just makes it really interesting to read about, because it's definitely, like, this time period, although it's also a little adjusted, so it's not as, I want to say, like, prejudiced to certain people. I wouldn't say it's a super accepting time period, but it's more accepting than, say, if you were to just time travel back to this time period and see how some people were treated. So it kind of fits into that cottagecore idea of how, like, everyone is accepted in the cottage. I don't know, I feel like that's kind of been a byproduct of cottagecore. It fits somehow. This was, I pulled that and I was like, why am I thinking of Timekeeper by Tara Sim? So I don't think that book is necessarily for everyone. I would give it a try. It was nice. It was enjoyable. It has action. It's got suspense. It's got intrigue. All of the characters are really great, and I think you would like it. Cyberpunk Apocalypse. That's not so bad. Blade Runner 2049. I really like Blade Runner 2049. That is an amazing movie. It is a cinematic marvel. Like, just, I watched that movie, and half the time I had no idea what was happening, either because I don't have enough brain cells to understand it, or I just wasn't paying attention, because this movie is just so beautiful to look at. And I know I've talked about it before in my March Madness video, but guess what? We're talking about it again, because you need to watch Blade Runner 2049. Blade Runner 2049 is definitely fits the bill for cyberpunk, and while it's not necessarily an apocalypse, there are definitely, like, world-changing things that can happen if the wrong people get their hands on the different ideas and things in this movie. And for whatever reason, when I think of this movie, it definitely feels like something world-shattering has happened that has left humanity in a horrible state. And again, I don't know all of the lore, so maybe something has. This movie, just honestly, this movie is so much like the cinematography for me that I barely know what the story is. It follows this one kind of detective, and he, however, like, the technology works in the Blade Runner universe, he's not fully human. He's not like a clone either, but just, he's not like totally like biologically human. And he kind of faces some of that world's like discrimination because of it, and it follows like his life and how it's starting to change because of different information and the different factors that are coming into it and just everything that's happening around him. And it's science fiction, and it's speculative, and it's just so beautiful to look at. Like, again, like, all I talk about in this movie is just like, look at it, just look at it. They use miniatures, the use of color, it's so vivid, fits the bill, you should watch it. Your worldview will change. I'm going to leave it off this video. We'll see what happens with these remaining vibes. So I hope you enjoyed this little vibe check with me. If you did, make sure to leave a like or even comment some of the ideas you might have had or the different combinations you have. Just, you know, if you had any thoughts in this video, just leave a comment. I'd love to hear from you. People can be so creative with the things that you come up with. And if you enjoyed this video and want to see more, make sure to subscribe. Not only will you see me making more videos, you'll see our podcast that comes out every week where we talk about a different movie, or you'll see my channel partner making her own videos that are also pretty cool that you should watch. Thank you so much for watching. I will leave you to the rest of your day. Thank you. Goodbye. Oh my god, why did I cut these so badly?